Everybody, it's Christopher, and well, I've got a whole lot of stuff I'm supposed to be doing right now, but if you can't see, I'll show you. See that? See how pretty it is out here? And see that? That's my bicycle. That's right. So even though I've got a lot I'm supposed to be working on right now, my bike told me that I can do it later. Yeah, that's it. So instead, I'm out here. And I make no apologies, no excuses. I'm just out here. On top of that, guys, I have got something that, man, God's really been wanting me to share with you. It's something that He's been working with me on quite a bit lately. And what I'm talking about is faith. And, you know, I'm not like a big faith guy, really. Not that I don't have any. It's just not something that I talk about all the time. But, you know, I've been going through some stuff here lately, you know, like I'm sure a lot of you are. And as I've been going through it, and I'm not going to go into the details of that, that's a story for a whole nother talk. In fact, by the time you watch this, it might be out. So when you get done here, go look for When Stuff Happens. That's what I'm going to call it. And I will go into a little bit more detail about some things there. And again, that's When Stuff Happens. So if it's not out yet when you're watching this video, it will be shortly. And so anyway, you know, I've been trusting God and just praying a lot and spending time talking to Him about it and just believing, you know, and knowing that He's right there with me in the midst of the storm and in the trials of life, right? But, you know, I found myself, you know, planning for the just in case. And I did post something on Facebook about that not too long ago, and that's really kind of what this is all about, taking it a little bit further with what God showed me. And so I was praying one day, and God just basically, He said, look, you know, you need to get in my Word, you need to open up the Bible. And so the Holy Spirit led me to the books of Matthew and the book of Hebrews. And so, you know, I was reading a few chapters at a time here and there, kind of going back and forth between the two. And I got to Hebrews 11, and that's what I really want to talk to you about today, is what God really showed me in Hebrews 11. Now, here's the thing. Jesus said that if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, that you can move mountains. And I know that. You know, I've heard that. I've read it, and it's kind of in me. And you know, faith the size of a mustard seed. Do you guys know how big a mustard seed is? It's tiny, right? So I'm like, faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. And here's Jesus. And, you know, quite a few times when He was hanging out with His disciples and they would do stuff, He'd get onto them for not having enough faith. And yet other people, He praised their faith. And He says that faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. And I know some of you are like, hey, doofus, that's, you know, metaphorical. No, it's not. It's actually not metaphorical, and I can prove it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get into Hebrews 11, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, guys, so bear with me because we're outside and it's a little windy at times, but here we go. So Hebrews 11:1 starts out, and it says that faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. So faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And that sounds good and fine and dandy and all. And, you know, hopefully that encourages you alone right there. But what happens is if you keep reading, you start running into some really interesting stuff here. It says, by faith we understand, and we in this is people who are believers, believers in God, and that would be, you know, reading out of their Bible, I guess, right? So it says, by faith we understand that the worlds were made. Hold on, here we go. By faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things which are visible. So when I'm going through all this stuff and I was talking to God about everything, I was like, okay, you know, I read that and I was like, you know, wait a minute. And it's almost like I heard His voice just speaking to me, you know, from inside. And He was just like, you know, do you believe that that I created the worlds with just my words? And I was like, well, yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. And He was like, well, then why are you having trouble believing and having faith for some of these other things for me to kind of get you through this? Why are you planning? Why aren't you just trusting in me and just do what I tell you to do? But instead of trying to do things on your own, where is faith in something so small when you believe that I did something so incredibly big and amazing? And then it keeps going. There's a lot more to this. It says, by faith, Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain. If you haven't read that, in the very beginning, these brothers, Cain and Abel, God wanted to hang out with them, spend some time with them, asked them to bring sacrifices, and one brought a sacrifice that was pleasing to God, not because of what it was, but because of the heart behind it. And that brother, he had faith. Enoch, by faith, was taken up so that he would not see death, and he was not found because God took him up. It goes on. That's a whole long story. So basically, this guy had so much faith and loved God so much that God just said, you know what? I'm just taking you straight to heaven. We're not going to go deal with a dead body and burying you or anything like that. I'm just gonna grab you, snatch you up right now, and you're going to hang out with me in eternity. But it keeps going. And so it also says here that without faith, it's impossible to please God. So that's kind of interesting. And that kind of goes back to what Jesus, he was kind of getting on to some of his disciples when they were kind of screwing up and saying, that kind of getting on to them for not having much faith. Again, remember, we're going back to what Jesus said about faith the size of a mustard seed being able to move a mountain, right? Okay, so, and it says, by faith, Noah, being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence prepared an ark for the salvation of his household. Okay, so you learn if you go back quite a ways that it took Noah like 100 years to build this ark. And then in, I believe it's 2 Peter, Peter refers to Noah as like a preacher of righteousness. And so basically what was going on is God comes to Noah and he says, all right, Noah, everybody is just messing everything up. And if I don't do something, you're not even going to, your family, who's not perfect, isn't even going to be able to survive this. So I'm going to pull a rescue mission here. In order to do that, you got to build a big freaking boat, and you got to get all these animals on it and all this other stuff. Well, so it took Noah 100 years to build this boat and get all these animals on it. And the whole time he's like preaching and telling people, look guys, it's not too late. Repent, and none of this has to go down. Of course, God, knowing they weren't going to do that in advance, had Noah build the boat, and of course they didn't. And so, but just imagine that. I mean, you hear God say, okay, this is what's going to happen. All right, maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe after the first 5 or 10 years working on this project, I still think I'm not crazy. After the first 25 years, everybody thinks I'm crazy, and I'm starting to wonder, but that's faith. So, and of course it happened. Here's another awesome one. By faith, it goes, and it talks a lot about Abraham. So the deal with him is that God promised Abraham that he would have a child, and he would have descendants as numerous as the stars and all this stuff, right? So by faith, Abraham believed God. He got up, left his job, his whole career where he was very wealthy, moved out to a place he didn't understand, didn't know anything about. It was kind of crazy, and he just trusted God all the way through all that. Now, he made some mistakes along the way, some big mistakes along the way, but part of the deal with him having a son was that, first of all, he was really old. Second of all, his wife couldn't have babies. They'd been trying. Third of all, she'd gotten really old. So this is like faith on faith on faith, right? And yet he still believed God about all this, ultimately, even after screwing up a few times, and he had that son. So then what happens? Then God comes back and he says, okay, so you got the son that I promised you to start this whole deal of you having all these descendants and all these blessings and stuff. And he says, but I want you to sacrifice him. What? You just gave me the first sign, the first step towards fulfilling this promise that I've been believing for. I packed up my family and I moved out of Dodge. I did all these things. I've been working hard. I've been trusting you. I've been believing you. And now you want me to throw it all away? By faith. It talks about how Abraham just basically said, okay, well, if that's what you want, God, that's what I'll do, because I know you'll resurrect him because you made a promise. He just believed that. He just knew that resurrection from the dead, I don't think is talked about anywhere prior to this scene with Abraham. But Abraham had faith. And so what happens? God doesn't even make him sacrifice. It was just like a test of his faith. It was really cool. It goes on to talk about Moses. And so then God speaks to him from a burning bush, which, would probably freaked me out quite a bit, but that's what happens. And God tells him he's got to go back and he's going to lead the people out of slavery. And so Moses goes through all this stuff. Now just think about this. He trusts God, that God's going to use him, and not that he did it perfectly, again, I mean, Moses is still just a guy, but he goes, and just imagine the first warning to Pharaoh. It's like, we got these 10 plagues coming. You can stop this at any time by doing what I'm telling you to do, but especially with the first plague, when he goes to Pharaoh and he says, look, this is what God says he's going to do. I take him seriously. You don't want to mess with this God. He's pretty awesome. And so, of course, Pharaoh denies it. Well, just for Moses to open his mouth, I mean, think about it. Just like, God, really? You're going to do this? This is kind of crazy. And so this just goes on. And then eventually, after, all the firstborn of all of Egypt, again, another faith thing, because God tells Moses, if you do this, go through this thing of sacrifice and putting the blood on the doorpost and all this stuff, then I'm going to spare all our kids, and it'll only hit the Egyptians. And so, after all, another act of faith, after all that, and Pharaoh lets them go, they all get out of there with all the loot and everything, and then they get pinned in at the Red Sea. So, once again, act of faith, Moses has to take a stand, and what happens? He has to believe, and the sea parts, and people walk through as though it were on dry land. And that was kind of the main one that I was getting to. All right, it goes on. I'll just read this to you real quick. It says, and what more shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of the fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight, women received back their dead by resurrection, and others were tortured, not accepting their release, so that they might obtain a better resurrection. And so that's all faith. So think about it, right? Faith, the size of a mustard seed. Faith the size of a mustard seed. Jesus says that will move mountains. And we saw in here, in Hebrews 11, and it goes on. There's so much in here, you should read it sometime. It talks about, and also in the book of Exodus, where the story is first told, about the Red Sea parting because of faith. So, there's a mountain around here somewhere. You can't see it from here. I was just going to check and see if we could see it in the background, because it's actually on the other side of where we're looking at. And it's called, I'm at Garden of the Gods right now, and the mountain is called Pikes Peak, America's mountain. And I think that's what they call it. But anyway, Pikes Peak's a pretty big mountain. So if you think about it, okay, it's a pretty big mountain. I have faith the size of a mustard seed. I do. I mean, a mustard seed, come on. Who can't muster up that much faith, right? So, based on what we know, this is so cool. Wait for it. Based on what we know, the Red Sea parting, the whole flood situation, the triple play of two old people and one of them being barren on top of that, and all that, and still having a baby, and all these things, all this stuff. I mean, you should read about Samson and the stuff that he did. Oh my goodness. I mean, he killed 100 people or 200, a ton of people with the jawbone of a jackass. Okay? Literally. He used that as a weapon and killed all these people. It was amazing. Okay, so, based on that, if I have faith the size of a mustard seed, which I do, okay, I'd say maybe even 2 mustard seeds someday. Someday I am a faith power plant. 3 mustard seeds. I might be pushing it. But at least 1, right? So if I went up to Pikes Peak Mountain and punched it with my faith, right? I mean, literally punched it, I'm saying, but had faith and punched it, I could bust it in half. I could break it right down the middle, and it would just fall apart, and I could walk right through. Think about it. I know you're thinking I'm crazy. Go ahead and process for a second. Dwell on it. Don't hang up though. Don't stop. Hang on. Just wait. Think about it. I'm not saying that I can walk up right now and physically accomplish that. But I have enough faith to do it. So think about a circumstance, and I can't imagine in this modern world how something like this would happen. But think of a circumstance where I was being chased by 500 dudes with AR-15s, okay? And I'm unarmed, and I'm on foot, okay? I need to get on the other side of that mountain because that's where the fort is, that's where the cavalry is, or whatever. All my homies are hanging out waiting to set a trap or something, I don't know. But I got to get on the other side of that mountain, and I know I can't run fast enough to get around it. I'll get tired, they'll catch me, or whatever, okay? In that instance, with the power of God, it's happened. See, right here, look, that's my Bible. Okay, this stuff has happened already. The parting of the Red Sea, the ark, the baby being born to the old Barian people, the killing all those people, all this, David, as a kid, a teenage boy, maybe 13, 14, 15, whatever, a kid versus a giant. Read his story. Note that he gets ticked off because the dude, Goliath, is insulting God. And he's like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? That's basically saying, who's this pile of poop running his mouth about my daddy? I'm going to take him out. Faith. In the physical and the natural, it looked impossible. In the physical and the natural, all these things seem impossible. But when God says go, when God's got your back on it like he would if I was being chased by 150 dudes with AR-15s and that's, made up situation, I said, if I punch that, I've got enough faith. If I punch that mountain, it would bust in half. I'd walk right through it. And not only that, as soon as I got to the other side, as they're chasing me, it close up on them and crush them like grapes. That's faith. That's faith. And you've all got it. Read this. Get excited about it. Build your faith, and you will be able to accomplish anything that God calls you to do. This is Christopher Holder with Real Life Ministry. I just hope this blessed you, and I will talk to you soon. I'm out.